This is 8.2b, evaluating variable expressions and translating phrases. To evaluate an algebraic expression means to find its numerical value once we know the values of the variables. So basically, we're going to have an expression and we're going to have some variables, and we just take those variables, plug it into the expression, and simplify. So in this first example, it says to evaluate each expression, we're going to evaluate 2x minus y when x equals 3 and y equals 2. So all we're going to do is take this expression and we're going to replace our variables with what they tell us to replace them with. Okay, so for the x, I'm going to replace that with a 3. And then for the y, I'm replacing it with 2. Then we have to make sure that we follow order of operations to solve. Okay, so since we're following order of operations, we know that we need to multiply before we add or subtract. So we're going to multiply 2 times 3. And we get 6 minus 2, which is 4. And that's it. Okay, in B, we have a squared minus b squared. And one important thing to remember when we're evaluating is whenever we plug things in for variables, when we replace the variable with a number, make sure that we put parentheses around it. And that's going to be really important when we have negative numbers, when we have powers and things like that, because if we don't have the parentheses, then we're going to have to perform a different operation. Okay, so I'm going to plug in 0 for A, and that's squared, minus negative 4 for B, and that's squared. Okay, so if I square 0, I just get 0. Minus, when I square a negative 4, negative 4 times negative 4 is a positive 16. Now this negative sign just got brought down, and the negative 4 turned to this 16. Okay, so 0 minus 16 would just be negative 16. All right, and that's how we evaluate an expression. Now, usually when we're dealing with math in the real world, we don't just have equations laying around. It's usually represented in words. So we need to make sure that we understand which words mean which operations. So here's a chart that tells us what the different words mean. For addition, we might hear sum, plus, added to, more than, increased by, or total. For subtraction, that would be difference of, minus, subtracted from, less than, decreased by, or less. Multiplication would use words like product, times, multiply, twice, of. Division is quotient, divide, into, ratio, divided by. And then to say that two things are equal to each other, we would use words like equals, gives, is, was, should be, yields, amounts to, represents, or is the same as. So now we're going to translate some expressions that are in words into ones using numbers and symbols. Okay, so the sum of a number and 3. Well, anytime we have a number and we don't know what that number is, we can represent it by using a variable. Now, your variable can be any letter you want it to be. It can be X, which is what is used a lot of times, but it could be P or Q or M or A or any letter you want it to be. Okay, so the sum of a number and 3. So I'm going to use X to represent the number. What does the word sum mean? It means addition. Okay, so the sum of a number and 3 would just be X plus 3. That's the sum of a number and 3. All right, the product of 5 and a number. Okay, so again, we need a variable to represent the number that we don't know. It doesn't matter what we use. just to make it a little different, I'm going to use n instead of an x, okay? So the product, what does that mean? It means multiply. Okay, so I can write the product of 5 and a number. I could either write 5, I can use a dot for multiplication. I could use parentheses to mean multiplication. Whenever I have a number and a letter, not two letters, because if I wrote, not two numbers, because if I wrote two numbers beside each other, like if I wrote 5 times 3, that looks like 53. So, of course, I can't do that. But if I have a number and a letter, or several letters, I can just write them beside each other, and that also means multiplication. The thing we would not want to do whenever we are multiplying numbers or letters in algebra is we do not want to use the x symbol to mean multiplication, because this looks like 5 times x times n. All right, so this would be wrong because we use x in algebra to represent a variable. Okay, so just remember not to write it that way. There's 3 other choices that you can use when we're talking about multiplication. The quotient of negative 15 in a number. Okay, so we'll go back to using x for a number. And what does the word quotient mean? It means to divide. Okay, so we could write negative 15 divided by x. And that's usually how we write it. We don't usually use the little division symbol in algebra. We usually use the bar. 5 times a number increased by 7. Okay, so this is a little bit more, so let's break it up and take it one step at a time. 5 times a number. Okay, so if my number is x, I can write 5 times a number as 5x. Okay, and then increased by means plus, or to add. 7. So to write 5 times a number increased by 7, that would be 5x plus 7. If I say twice a number, what operation am I using? It'd be multiplication. So this would be the same thing as 2x, twice a number. So twice a number plus 1 would just be 2x plus 1. A number added to 8. Okay, so added to, of course, would be addition. And if we're going to add a number to 8, we got to start with 8 and then add a number. Now, since it's addition and addition has that commutative property, then we could write x plus 8 and it would be okay because we can add in any order. But subtraction does not have a commutative property. So when we're dealing with subtraction, we have to be careful and put it in the correct order. Otherwise, we will get the wrong sign for our answer. So in G, it says a number decreased by 10. How would you write that? Okay, so we start with a number and then it's decreased by 10. So x decreased by 10. All right, what about H? Okay, even though we start with the words, a number, this number is subtracted from 10. So if we're going to take away something from a number, we have to start with that number before we can take away from it. So a number subtracted from 10, so we have 10 and we're going to take away a number from it. I says 10 less than a number. Okay, so 10 less than a number. So again, we're subtracting from a number. So this time it's a number and we're going to subtract from it. We're going to take away 10 from it. 10 less than a number. And then J, a number less 10. A number less 10. So those subtractions are pretty tricky. Be careful when you're dealing with subtraction word problems.